What if I told you that a war thousands of miles away has sparked a wave of unrest on campuses across the USA? Welcome to the complex labyrinth of the Israel-Hamas war, a conflict that has been brewing for years and has now erupted with a ferocity that has sent shockwaves around the world. At the heart of this conflict is a bitter dispute over territory, identity, and power, leading to an escalating cycle of violence that has claimed countless lives and left regions in ruins. In the midst of this, a gripping hostage situation unfolded. Families of those captured by Hamas, desperate for their loved ones' return, organized protests, calling for action. Yet in a controversial twist, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accused these very families of aiding Hamas, stating that their protests were hindering efforts to secure the hostages' release. This sparked a fiery backlash, with the families accusing Netanyahu of neglecting his duty to address security failings and terror attacks by Hamas. Despite this tumultuous backdrop, a glimmer of hope emerged during a temporary ceasefire. In a move that was as unexpected as it was relieving, Hamas released 105 hostages. It was a respite, however brief, in an otherwise relentless storm of violence. Yet this conflict is not contained within the borders of Israel and Gaza. It reaches far beyond, touching the lives of people thousands of miles away. Universities across the United States have become battlegrounds of their own, with protests erupting on campuses from coast to coast. Students, faculty, and administrators are grappling with the fallout of a war that, while geographically distant, feels strikingly close to home. As we can see, the reverberations of this conflict are far-reaching, affecting not just those directly involved but others around the globe. As we delve deeper into this issue, we'll explore how the responses of Ivy League universities to this global crisis have varied, and the consequences that these protests have had on campuses across the nation. Now let's turn our attention closer to home. How have our prestigious Ivy League universities responded to this international crisis? Amid rising tensions on college campuses related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Jewish students at Ivy League universities have been raising their voices against anti-Semitism. The responses from the presidents of these universities have been multifaceted and diverse. At Brown University, President Christina Hull-Paxson refused to honor a referendum calling for divestment from companies involved in human rights abuses in Palestine. She condemned a hate crime against Palestinian students and emphasized the need for a safe and inclusive campus environment. Moving on to Columbia University, President Minouche Shafik established a task force on anti-Semitism following incidents on campus. In collaboration with Barnard College, efforts were made to support Jewish students and foster community inclusivity. Cornell University's President Martha E. Pollack took a firm stance against anti-Semitism and all forms of bigotry. This came after a student made death threats against Jewish students. She met with the affected students and released a statement emphasizing a zero-tolerance policy towards hatred. At Dartmouth College, President Cian Blaylock encouraged open dialogue on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. She emphasized the importance of respectful discourse and the rejection of threats and intimidation. Responses from Harvard University's Claudine Gay and University of Pennsylvania's Liz McGill met with criticism during a congressional hearing on campus anti-Semitism. Both faced calls for violence or genocide targeting Jewish students and issued apologies for their initial remarks. McGill, facing backlash and calls for her resignation, ultimately stepped down as president of Penn or Princeton University's president, Christopher Ludwig Eisgruber, moderated a discussion on campus about free speech and mutual respect in the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Clearly, the reactions have been varied, with some responses leading to backlash and even resignations. The Ivy League university presidents have taken varying approaches to address campus tensions related to anti-Semitism and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But one thing is clear, the issue is complex and requires a thoughtful, measured approach. But what happens when students take matters into their own hands? As the Israel-Hamas conflict rages on, universities across the United States have become hotbeds of protest. Students, driven by a sense of justice and urgency, have taken to the streets and campus quadrangles, raising their voices against the ongoing violence. Their demands are clear and resounding. They call for their universities to divest from companies that support the conflict. These student-led protests signal a growing dissatisfaction with institutional complicity in the conflict, a call to action that reverberates across lecture halls and student unions. However, the protests have not been without their share of controversy. Some Jewish students have voiced concern, suggesting that the protests have veered into anti-Semitic territory. These concerns underscore the fine line between political activism and hate speech, a line that can blur in the heat of passionate protest. Perhaps nowhere has this line been more starkly drawn than at the University of Southern California. The university, in response to the escalating protests, made the unprecedented decision to cancel its main commencement ceremony. This decision triggered a wave of arrests as protesters clashed with law enforcement in a dramatic display of civil disobedience. This incident at USC is a stark reminder of the consequences that can arise when the fervor of protest meets the rigidity of institutional structure. It's a testament to the power of student activism, a force capable of disrupting even the most time-honored traditions. Yet it also raises questions about the nature of these protests. Can the line between activism and hate speech be clearly defined? And if so, who gets to draw that line? These questions, like the protests themselves, challenge us to consider the complexities of free speech in an increasingly polarized world. These protests demonstrate the power of student activism, but they also raise questions about the line between protest and hate speech. So, what does all of this mean for us? We've delved deep into the repercussions of the Israel-Hamas war, from the battleground to university campuses across the United States. The conflict has elicited a medley of responses, notably from the Ivy League presidents. Some have faced harsh criticism and even resignations, while others have strived for open dialogue and inclusivity. Protests have swept across campuses nationwide, fueling both solidarity and contention. These demonstrations have led to disruptions, including the cancellation of USC's main commencement ceremony and even arrests. Students are demanding divestment from companies supporting the conflict, while others fear these protests are veering into the territory of anti-Semitism. In the midst of these complexities, it's clear that the impact of the Israel-Hamas war extends far beyond the borders of the Middle East. It's a testament to how interconnected our world is today, and a stark reminder of the ripple effects of conflict. But remember, in the midst of all this, it's crucial to maintain respect and understanding for all perspectives.